Hi, everyone. Welcome to Potluck Food Talks. Today, we're going to talk about tacos.
Tacos. I think tacos are some of our favorite foods, no?
One of the best things in the world. Yeah. Especially authentic, real tacos.
It's really hard to find authentic, real tacos. We can't talk for anybody, and I can't talk for the States, where I think that, there's a lot more. But I mean, like in Europe and anywhere else I've been, it's pretty much impossible to find proper, authentic Mexican food, let alone tacos.
I would say it's pretty hard, but there are always secret corners where you find something.
Yeah, there's always, if there's Mexicans around, there's tacos around, There's somewhere in some backyard, there's somebody making tacos de lengua,
So what can you talk about your experience in Mexico? I haven't been to Mexico, and you lived there for how long? About 2 years?
About 2 years, yeah, in Mexico City primarily. And I think that I lived 80% of my diet consisted of tacos. Yeah, no joke. I mean, it's just so convenient to just walk out the door and you have stand next to stand selling tacos. And I mean, what is a taco? A taco is, things in a tortilla.
Basically, yeah.
And apart from that, it varies so much in style. And that's what I found super, super interesting,
Yeah, it's a super broad universe, right? There are many different tortillas, also different traditions, regions. There are even Arabian tacos, which is something traditional Mexican. Did you try all of these things over there?
I tried to, man. I tried to try them all. It's like Pokemon, got to catch them all. But it was too many in my limited amount of time in that beautiful country. But I did, it was my main occupation, sort of in my free time, to go and search out taco places, because I found it super fascinating. And also just even inside of the different styles, because a taco stand is often so makeshift, it's just people putting up a stand and then making something, putting it in a tortilla and selling it to you for money. That even if they're doing a certain style, there's little differences that really make a big difference. And so everybody has their favorite place that they go to, or they have this secret tip. Oh man, there's this one place, but it's only there on Thursdays. And you have to go there quickly because it sells out in 1 hour. And
yeah, it's like donuts in Berlin, that you have your secret donut place that you only share with your friends because you don't want nobody to know.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, for me, the big difference in tacos is sort of there's I think the two main ones are there's carnitas and there's al vapor, or tacos de cabeza.
Yes,
and carnitas are, meats that's cooked in fat, basically. You have a big pot of sort of boiling fat. And it's not just fat, it's other secretive things too. I've seen and heard people using very strange things that they put into this cooking concoction that they end up cooking the slabs of pork in, like Coca-Cola.
Mexican cuisine is super maximalistic, right? You will see recipes with lots of steps and large lists of ingredients, and it's quite common.
And it's for me as a Western cook coming from Michelin star cooking, when I was talking to local people, and I was sort of man, the carnitas, they're super nice. And they're sort of oh yeah, you know how they make them? They take pork fat and they add Coca-Cola. And and for me, it was no, don't tell me this.
I've seen it a lot. Basically, if you think about it, Coca-Cola is, if you reduce it to nothing, it's water with sugar and spices. That's what it is. So,
well, yeah, but it still feels wrong,
It does. But I've heard of people finishing sauces with Coca-Cola reduction in Michelin star restaurants. I've heard about that. I won't say the name of the restaurant.
Yeah, Tim Rauer maybe, but we don't talk about that.
It was actually. I won't say it.
Okay. You'll tell me later.
No, but Tim Rauer, I've heard that with Red Bull, adding, cooking some grapes in a Red Bull reduction or something like that. Yeah.
I've heard my share of stories, but anyway, it's hey, who are we to judge? We don't have 3 Michelin stars.
I actually like his cooking. If I'm honest, I went there once and I really liked it. Well, what do you have to say?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. And so basically it's sort of for me, from my ignorant foreign point of view, it was kind of okay, it's either confit and fat, or it's cooked with steam. And so often you steam a whole head and then use up all the parts from the head, whether that's the cheeks, whether that's the tongue. And then there's barbacoa, which we briefly talked about the other day, I think. Oh no, we didn't touch on it, but which is super interesting. It's not really tacos, but it's often served, as a taco, sort of like pit cooking lamb. Then there's birria, which is things cooked in a sort of broth, shredded meat, in a very intense broth. So, which is very cool because you get a little cup of the consommé with a little bit of like diced onion and cilantro in it. And you can drink the consommé before you eat your taco. So you can dip your taco into the consommé. Super delicious. Always one of my favorites. Obviously, there's the famous tacos al pastor, which are super quintessential, achiote marinated meat that's, layered up like a doner, which comes from the Arab culture of sort of like making kebabs with the pineapple on top. And then obviously everything in between, sort of like, with chistorra, with cheese, like bistec, which is basically just like a thin slice of beef, cecina, which is also very interesting, which is beef. It's kind of like a beef jerky. They take beef and they cut it super, super thinly into like a huge sheet. And then they cure it and air dry it until it's basically like a light beef jerky. And then it's kind of seared off and put into a taco. It's a very, very complex eating culture.
Then you have all these types of tortillas. Comes to my mind, the one with hoja santa, which is green. Then you have the one with, is it always the brown gray one? Is that always with la coche or is there something else? There are some that are kind of gray, others more brown. Like
I think the gray one might be with la coche, yeah, but it's like these like many different colored types of tortilla.
Wait a second, let's explain what with la coche is.
Oh yeah,
because it's that's quite something. So in French they call it champignon de maïs, like corn fungus. Because that's what it is. So you see this, imagine like a corn grain that grows like a champignon out of the. So if you see, it's counterintuitive to see like a champignon full of gray mushrooms that grow out of it, and thinking like, oh, this is the delicious part that I'm going to take out and eat. Like that's something that really impressed me the first time that I saw it. And it's something that is super, super delicious. It's somewhere in between corn and mushrooms.
Yeah, it's like you say, it's such a weird thing because it is an infection in a way. It's fungus spores that infect the corn and then it morphs, it grows into these bulbous sort of tumor looking like gray corn monsters. But it's not just molding or like going off. It's a very specific type of spore that grows under very specific conditions. And so it's kind of like, it's like the Mexican truffle, but it's like, it's like a, in wine, there's a noble rot, it's called, where grapes start to mold in a very specific way, but that concentrates the sugars and makes it really delicious. And it's kind of the same with the wheat la coche. It's a very particular type of mold that then grows and makes it into this product. It's super fascinating. It's super unique. Never seen that anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, I've seen that in Bolivia actually, and it was funny because the caseras, the cholitas as they call them, these farm ladies, they would hide it. It was something. I mean, they know that they probably know that that's super delicious.
Yeah, but then obviously Mexico has an amazing variety of heritage, like heirloom corn in many, many different types of colors. And the main difference is, the geographical point. So in Mexico, they eat two types of tortillas. It's either a flour tortilla or it's a corn tortilla. So in the north, where it's more deserty and they grow more wheat, it's a flour tortilla. And then sort of like more center and more south, where they can grow corn, and they eat corn tortillas, So depending on who you talk to.
As far as I know, wheat was introduced by Europeans, right? It's not something autochthonous from the Americas. Yeah, I would say so.
I think so, yeah. And if you see these sort of tortillas that are like pink or like dark blue, that's just the color of the corn, that doesn't get lost. Yeah, that doesn't get lost by nixtamalization. That's just like heirloom corn.
Okay, wait. Nixtamalization. Let's talk about that. Because that's also like a super crazy ancient Mexican culinary technique that doesn't exist nowhere else, which is
crazy.
Yeah, it's cooking with, how do you call that in English?
Lye is what you call it.
Yeah, cal, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So it used to be done with ash. Ash used to be mixed into the water that was used to cook corn. And
yeah, like to make it like super highly alkaline, right?
That's exactly right. But it's a little bit of a fickle process. It has to be the right alkalinity, and it changes the proportions of the corn to be digestible, for one. It also changes the way that it holds together because if you cook corn, you grind it, it doesn't have any gluten. It doesn't stick together, right? So this process, it changes the proportions of the corn so that you can actually form a tortilla out of it. And also on top of that, it changes the flavor in a very, very particular way. It's very hard to describe. If you have experienced it, if you have tasted it, if you've ever had a nice fresh made tortilla, you'll know the flavor. It's this very particular nixtamalized flavor that is the sort of culinary heritage of, Mexicans. I think every Mexican that's out of their country for a while, and then they smell or taste this flavor of nixtamalization, they're immediately brought back home. There's also a flavor that I've never seen anywhere else.
Yeah, it's something super particular, both the technique and the flavor. And then it's a key for tacos and many corn-derived products. I wonder if the word nixtamal and what tamal means in Aztec or whatever that word comes from, because tamal is at the same time this corn, how would you describe it? Like a corn dumpling, something like that?
A tamal?
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, it's kind of the word tamal, it appears in different Latin cultures, no? But in Mexico, it's usually, this kind of like a dumpling, no?
Like a dumpling, like a boiled cornbread. I don't know how to, a huge corn gnocchi. I don't know how to describe it.
It's kind of hard to describe, this corn gelatin sort of thing, wrapped in leaves and then steamed, usually filled also.
Exactly. Sometimes corn leaves, sometimes also plantain leaves.
Super, super traditional and super delicious. And also only doable because of the nixtamalization. Otherwise, it would just completely crumble apart. But there's so many of those tamales, there's tetelas, there's so many different shapes. There's gorditas, which are these fat little sort of discs that there's topes, I think they're called. Yeah, sort of there's different shapes that people use this masa, which is basically what nixtamalized and then ground corn is in Mexico.
Yeah, the same with tortillas. I remember also that there are this how are they called? Infladitas, which are the ones that, it's kind of this potato soufflés, souffled tortillas that are empty on the inside. I've also seen, I had in Cosme these other tortillas that were air dried. That is also completely counterintuitive, that being something, making chips out of tortillas, letting them air dry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole universe. It's such an ancient, such an old culture. And I guess at least, well, we can't know, but I think that there are many traditions that have been preserved culinary-wise and others that have evolved, as I said, the introduction of wheat or of other cultures like the Arabs that have made their own contribution.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's all these traditional things. I think there's a really beautiful movement in Mexico in the culinary world where young chefs, they try to not necessarily revive, but kind of take all these traditional things and present them in a modern way, but just keeping their heritage roots really, really well intact. And if you haven't been to Mexico and you go there, it's it's just really easy to discover, Mexican food in a very authentic way.
Yeah, that's something I absolutely have to do.
Yeah.
What else? Do you have a memorable taco? One you said, okay, that was something out of this world?
I have a few, I'm a big fan of tacos de cabeza, tacos de lengua. So tongue tacos and tacos de cachete were always my thing.
So cabeza's head, what kind of head? Pork's head.
So tacos de cabeza is usually a steamed cow's head. And, you steam the head whole for a long time until everything's really, really tender. and basically everything from the head is used. The cheeks, which in Mexico, like in Latin Spanish, are called cachete, which is super gelatinous and fatty and delicious. And then the tongue, obviously, which is really meaty, taco de lengua. But then also the eyes and like different parts from the heads, the jowl, it's super, super nice. And I always really liked it because it was so clean. It wasn't like super fatty or anything. Really meaty and juicy. Cooking with steam is such a beautiful way of cooking anything, because it's so gentle. Then there's a place in Mexico City called Cocuyos, and they make a taco de tripa. So a tribe taco, which is insanely good. They confit a tribe. So if you have this, you have this carnitas pot, it's a huge pot of bubbling oil, and you have meat, different cuts. You have nopales, which is the cactus, that are kind of confiting there. Usually you have some longaniza also, the sausage. And then at the side, they just had the tripe, the intestines that were confiting for a really long time. So they were really, really tender. And then before they serve them, before they put them in a taco, they just put them on a really hot plancha, just like on both sides until they're like a little bit crispy. Chop them up, put them in a taco, and super amazing. Super, super nice.
That sounds really good.
Yeah. It's amazing. Like, it's so nice. I know a lot of people have, they don't like to eat offal so much, but you had zero like bad flavor or smell. It was just absolutely delicious. A little bit crispy, a little bit chewy, super, super delicious. I had one birria place that I really liked where the consommé was just like this really intense beef bouillon with chili and, like a little bit of raw onion in it. And it was just really, really nice. And that birria place, they had amazing birria, but they also made a taco de bistec where they just had like thinly sliced beef that they would sear. And then I would always order it with cheese. So they put some queso Oaxaca on top, that like stringy cheese that melts really well. And what they would do is they would sear the beef, and then they would add a very generous splash of Maggi seasoning sauce. And that would caramelize and like glaze the beef. And then they would put the cheese on top. And then they would put in a little bit of French fries into the taco, like fried potato. Oh my fucking God. That was so good. It was like a bigger taco, like larger size than the usual. The tortillas you get are usually quite small. Also, inside a tip, never order more than 2 tacos at a time. Don't be a tourist and order like 5. Yeah, don't be a gringo and order 5, 6 tacos at the same time. Order 2, then order 2 more. Don't be greedy. But yeah, it was like a little bit bigger, and it was just super filthy. But this like umami bomb was like amazing. And then like also a really funny thing that a taco stand near my house did was they had like funny names for the tacos they would do. So they would have the lawyer, and the lawyer would be, can you guess what the lawyer would be?
No idea.
A lot of tongue and just a little bit of brain.
That's so funny, man.
And I thought that was super charming,
That's so nice. Well, as you know, I haven't been to Mexico, but I would say the New Year's experience I had was like a proper taco experience. Apart from having tacos in different tacos places around the world, like presumably authentic tacos, whatever you can find in other countries. But eating at Cosme in New York was quite an experience. Cosme is this restaurant run by Daniela Soto Inés, and at the same time is part of Enrique Olvera's group. And Enrique Olvera was this chef that he was probably the first one to put tacos in a fine dining context, to having like a long tasting menu where tacos is a very important part of the menu. And it works kind of like nigiris, where you have like just like a very little piece where you have everything in 1 or 2 bites, which is like a more fancy minimalistic way of presenting tacos. Some are purple because it's purple corn. The other ones are brown because it's with la coche, and different types of tortillas, different toppings, like this whole experience, having them warm, like these authentic tortillas of corn that have this special break to it when different from wheat tortillas that are like perhaps more elastic, I would say. And yeah, and having different toppings, different sauces. Yeah, it's quite a thing. I think everybody loves tacos and tortillas.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best meals that I had while I was in Mexico City was cooked by a good friend of mine, Victor Alejandro Bermudez, who was working with me in Lorea in Mexico City. And his grandma cooked lengua in pipián, which is like a sauce made from seeds, like often like pumpkin seeds. It's sort of like, it's kind of hard to explain, but it's like sweet, delicious, thick sauce with chilies and seeds and stewed tongue. And we had it with tortillas de harina, so flour tortillas, which are also made in a very particular way with a little bit of manteca, so a little bit of pork fat. And they were really like, I was surprised because I was always like, oh, corn tortillas are much better than flour tortillas, But then I had like a proper flour tortilla and it was so like soft and smooth. And it had this like, the pork fat gave it like this little bit of silkiness. And this lengua in pipián was by far one of the best things I ate in my time in Mexico. It's absolutely amazing.
That's it for this week's episode of Potluck Food Talks. If you like what we're doing, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok as Potluck Food Talks. The show airs every Monday.